everyone, I'm Jess, and I'm the content manager here at Course Report. Course Report is the resource for helping people find the right coding boot camps for them. You can use the Course Report website to research the best coding boot camps all over the world, as well as insights on which coding languages to learn, where to apply, and how to fund your very own coding bootcamp experience. Today, I'm speaking with Robert Gardner from LearningFuze about the differences between React classes and React hooks. Robert has an extensive background in web development, including working at Google, and is now an instructor at LearningFuze. So Robert, thank you so much for speaking with me today. Before we dive into React, first, I'd really like to know, how did you get into software engineering? Was it like a traditional or a non-traditional route?
Well, thanks for chatting with me, and I appreciate the opportunity. So when I was at Stanford, I was working on my physics PhD, and Apple introduced the Macintosh computer. It kind of gives you an idea for how long I've been in the industry. But they gave a number of these computers to various schools and universities, and one of my friends at Stanford got one. He was in the physics department with me, and he wrote a little simulation for computer using the Macintosh computer to compute something. And it took several days for it to finish. And when it finished, it spit out a single number. And he thought that was a little mellow or anticlimactic. So he had the Mac, he played around with the Mac's sound system, which was new on personal computers at that time. And he had it play a few strains of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony before it printed the answer. So it went da 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 da, and then it would spit out the answer. And so he started playing around with that and thought he might turn that into an application where users could play around with music and with the sounds on the Mac. And he got me and another friend together to see if we could make that happen. So we did, and we shipped it, and it was a rather successful product. But anyway, that's how I first started commercial software development. My first few jobs after Stanford were all physics related, but then after a few years, I thought, I really enjoy computer software more than I do physics. So I switched careers. So I guess you'd say that my programming is all self-taught and through on-the-job training.
That's so cool. And you've been in the field for a long enough time. You've seen it change and evolve. What inspired you to teach at LearningFuze right now after all this time of working in the field?
Well, I've had a successful and an enjoyable career. It ended after about 14 years at Google, and where I was actually, my final role was a director of software engineering. And throughout my career, though, I put a lot of effort into teaching and mentoring other engineers. While I was at Google, in fact, a colleague and I created several classes that we taught to Googlers all around the world. The most popular were on technical leadership and on writing clean code. So that was very satisfying to me. I really enjoyed helping others advance in their careers. So when my career at Google finally came to an end and I tried to retire, I found that I really missed the experience of helping others. So I started looking into teaching at various venues, and I finally found LearningFuze. I was impressed with their approach to teaching, their success at helping students become software developers. So I decided to join them. And I'm glad I did. I've had a lot of fun, and I really love helping people launch a career in software development.
Wow, they're so lucky to have you. And are you teaching the web development bootcamp?
Yeah, I teach full stack web development there. I do the full-time in-person class.
So since you've come into the LearningFuze staff, what kinds of changes have you already made to that web development curriculum?
Well, I've only been there a few months, and my goal there was to make the curriculum more relevant to the today's students. And so over the last few years, JavaScript development has solidified around the ES6 and beyond features, such as const and let, promises, classes, async await, that kind of stuff. And so, teaching the original ES5 version of JavaScript, I believe, is just no longer beneficial to students. So one change we made is to now teach only these ES6 plus features. And then on the front end, in early 2019, React introduced a new technique for writing React components, which they called the React hooks. And originally in React, you would write components using classes. You would declare a class that extends a special React component class, and then you would override various lifecycle methods in it. But with this approach, code quickly would become difficult to understand and maintain, especially as your site became larger and larger. With React hooks, on the other hand, you write your components using just standard JavaScript functions, and then they have special React functions called hooks that you use to manage the component lifecycle. So it's only been about 4 years since React hooks were introduced, but they've already become the predominant approach to writing React code. And in fact, just 2 or 3 weeks ago, React changed their official documentation to now focus only on React hooks. So in January, when we were making the other changes to the curriculum, we switched from teaching React classes to only teaching React hooks. And we think this provides a real benefit to our students since they're learning a more modern and a more widely used technology. Mm-hmm. Oh, and then finally, I'd like to mention that we've also taken a very close look at everything we teach. We want to make sure it provides a tangible benefit. You know, students have to absorb an awful lot of material in a very short time. So we want to focus only on the things that they'll use early in their career. And we want to give students a strong foundation that they can build on as they develop in their careers. And so that's what we're doing, is trying to adapt the curriculum to help them develop better in their careers as they progress.
Oh, I love hearing that. We're always here at Course Report, we love hearing coding boot camps iterating on their curriculum to just make sure it's up to date with what today's employers are looking for. So before we dive into, classes versus hooks, I just wanted to give our audience a basic idea of what is React and like how is it typically used.
Well, so when the World Wide Web was first invented, the intent was simply to share documents. And these documents, they were static and unchanging, and you couldn't interact with them. But over time, it became clear that the web was not just amazing for delivering these documents everywhere, but also for creating applications. But when you create an application, you have to execute code inside the browser. And so you can interact with the user. For example, if the user clicks the play button on a video, you want that video to start playing. But to do that, you have to have code running inside the browser. JavaScript was invented at Netscape in order to make that easy. And this went well for a while, but as our websites became more and more and more complex, it became very, very hard to write all that JavaScript code and keep it bug-free and solid. So to address this problem, a lot of companies started introducing code libraries or frameworks that you could use that would make it easier to write more complex websites. So React was developed by Facebook, and it's currently the most successful of these frameworks. So really what it does is it lets you easily create what we call components, which are just visual elements on the screen. And then you reuse those components throughout your site. For example, in the video case, I could create a video component that encapsulates all the buttons and the user interaction and everything else necessary to play and pause and restart your video. I then can use that component in multiple different places on my site. And in fact, I can even make it available to other developers to use in their sites. And that's been the burgeoning open source list of components and React components that you can use all over.
Awesome. That is a perfect breakdown of React. So let's now have you share your screen so we can walk through classes and hooks. So Robert, what exactly are classes in React?
Well, in React, if you're using classes, then you make use of JavaScript's class inheritance mechanism. So you create a component by declaring a class that extends this React component class. And then you implement or you override the component lifecycle methods. These are methods which tell React what to do as the component evolves on the screen. So we call them lifecycle methods because they're called when the component is first created or born, when it's first drawn on the screen, when the user interacts with it, and then when the component is removed from the page or it dies. And so that's why we call it the life cycle, from birth to death. So anyway, so you write the code and you extend your React component class, and then you override all these methods.
Yeah, so Robert, if you can show us an example of classes in the code, that would be great.
Yes, right here where I'm sharing my screen, I have a React component that is written in class. Again, following on this video player example I've used, I have a video player component here I'm declaring a class that extends the React component class. And so I have a constructor. I tell it what state I want to have, which in this case is the video playing or is it not? This is because JavaScript classes are weird. And so you have to do this to just define that. Don't worry about that. Here's a lifecycle method. This is what is called when your component first mounts or when it is first drawn on the screen. And when that happens, I want to start the video playing. So I tell the video to play and I set my state to say that I'm playing. I can draw down here in the render method. This is another lifecycle method. When the component is drawn on the screen, each time it gets drawn, this gets called. And so I have my HTML here that I'm going to execute whenever the component is rendered. I declare a video component. I tell it where the source is, which I get from my properties that they're passed into my component. And then I say when it gets clicked, I want to toggle the play from playing to paused. And that is what's done up here in this function or this component method up here. And it, if it's currently playing, which I determine by looking at its state, then I will pause the video. If it's not playing, then I'll play the video and then I'll set the state accordingly. So that's kind of how you do classes in React. You extend the component and you override these lifecycle methods. And there are a number of other lifecycle methods you can use. This is a fairly simple example.
That's great. So now if we're comparing this to the hooks, like what exactly are hooks and can you show us what they look like in the code?
You bet. Well, so if you're doing your React with hooks, then instead of creating a class, you simply define a function. Now, this function has a few simple rules that it has to follow, but otherwise it's just a standard JavaScript function. And then when you're managing the lifecycle, you call the React hook functions. So hooks in React are just they're simply special functions that React uses to manage the component lifecycle. For example, there's a hook function to get and manage the component state, and there's one for indicating what should happen when the component is first drawn on the screen and all these other things. And so here's the example of that same class, the video player class that I converted to using hooks. So we see here that I'm exporting a function, again, the video player. It's just a function. And it takes these properties, the source and the video type. This use state is a hook, and it's what I use to manage the state. Here's whether or not it's playing. Video use ref is how I get access to the components in the HTML browser. Use effect is another hook that tells React what to do when the component is first drawn on the screen, when it mounts. And again, I want to tell my video to start playing, and I set my state to say I'm now playing. And down here in the return, I simply return my HTML that I want to be rendered in the browser. And again, I have a video element I have with this source where I get the source and the type for my properties, and a button that when it's clicked, I toggle the play. And again, here's the function that was similar to what was in before, same code. I just pause or play the video and set my state accordingly. So that's how you would do that same type of thing using a React hook.
So Robert, today's engineers and developers, are they using classes and hooks interchangeably, or are classes really being phased out?
Classes are kind of being phased out because it's much more convenient to write code in hooks, and you can write more complex code and keep it straight in your head and understand better what you're doing. But it is still possible for class-based components and hook-based components to run in the same application and even to interact with each other, which makes it very nice for evolving and migrating from one to the other. There's a lot of older React components that were written before there were hooks, so they're written using classes, and they're very, very nice and still very functional and usable. And so you can use them inside of your code that's written using hooks and interact with them. And in fact, a lot of large software projects at many companies now were originally written using hooks, and so, or sorry, using classes. So they have those class-based stuff, but they're gradually migrating and writing their newer components using hooks. Mm. So today, most of the new React code that is actually written using hooks.
And you mentioned that LearningFuze has changed the curriculum a bit to just focus on learning hooks versus classes. Like, what are the benefits of new developers just focusing on learning hooks?
Well, the main motivation behind that switch to teaching only hooks is we wanted to better prepare them for what they're likely to encounter in the job market. Since most new React code is now written using hooks, the students are better off if they learn hooks instead of learning classes. They'll encounter maybe legacy code that uses React classes, but if you know hooks really well, it's fairly easy to read and understand. And then if you end up at a company that's still using React code with classes, well, they can pick it up on their own fairly without too much trouble. As companies migrate their code from classes to hooks, most of the new code is being written using hooks because you can write better, more stable, and reusable code. So the students are better off knowing that information and that technique.
Robert, how is LearningFuze keeping the curriculum up to date with today's workforce needs? Like, are you going to take a look at it again in 6 months, especially because AI is now all the buzz?
Oh, we're looking at it all the time and constantly figuring out what's the best things to do. I'm actually doing even more changes and updates this week. The best way we can keep our curriculum up to date is to have instructors who have recent industry experience. And so this keeps us aware of what's actually happening in the industry. We know what skills are truly important, and we know what the students will be doing once they get hired and start working on their own. And then another thing that we do at LearningFuze is we stay abreast of the types of questions that are being asked in our interviews, the skills that are being requested. And we also have a very active alumni community that we interact with a lot. They give us information about what skills they need, what new things they're learning, what they learned at LearningFuze that wasn't very useful, and then how can we better enhance the curriculum to meet their needs. So, for example, based on my personal industry experience, I've become very interested in teaching more TypeScript at LearningFuze and more unit tests. We're also finding that more and more of our potential employers are asking about TypeScript skills. And then I also went and surveyed our alumni and found out what their thoughts and experiences were. And this all indicated to me that that's a really good direction to take. So we will be introducing more and more TypeScript and unit testing over time.
That's cool. I love that you also reached out to alumni to just see what they're actually using on the job. My next question was just like, how is this iterated curriculum like preparing this next generation of developers and engineers for today's and the near future's workforce?
Well, so my biggest goal as an instructor is to teach students skills they'll need to build a successful career. Now, obviously, that starts with getting a job, and they need to get that first job. But if they're not advancing in their career after they get that job, then I think we have failed them. They should be getting promotions, pay raises, better work. I find that too many coding schools emphasize just getting that first job, and so they might focus on copy-based programming or such rather than on really understanding what they're doing. So I believe that, and actually I believe that instead of measuring a coding camp by how much, by its job placement rate, we should really be measuring them by their alumni's advancement in their careers. And so the curriculum changes we make and that we're continuing to make, they're intended to prepare students to be successful in their new technology career. And as I mentioned earlier, we think it's vital to teach students how to learn technology on their own so that they can adapt and change as the tech industry evolves. It evolves very rapidly. And so we focus on depth instead of breadth because we think that better prepares the students for a new career. It's much easier to learn a new technology if you know one of them really, really well. So the curriculum updates we've made, plus the ones we're still working on, they teach skills that are more relevant to what they'll be encountering in their new job.
I feel like that's an excellent place to wrap up this deep dive into React hooks and classes. Thank you so much, Robert, for sharing your expertise on this subject. You definitely seem like such an asset to the LearningFuze team. We will be posting a recording and a transcript of this video interview on the Course Report blog with contact information for LearningFuze, just in case you're interested in applying for any of their upcoming cohorts. And thanks so much to all of you for watching. Tweet at us, email us, and let us know what topic you'd like us to cover next on the Course Report blog. And in the meantime, follow Course Report on Facebook and Twitter. And if you're a bootcamp alumni, don't forget to post a review of your own bootcamp experience on Course Report. Your review is a huge help to anyone thinking of getting into tech today.